Savvy Business Radio, drawing out the best from our guests with our host, Christina Nichman.
Our guest today is Gerhard of Inquizo, discussing the direct link between curiosity and performance. Find out more at inquizo.com.
Hi, Janet. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. We're so blessed to have you here today to talking about your wonderful company and research, Hvisdos. You're going to talk about curiosity that we forget about as adults. As kids, we're naturally curious. I mean, we hear 5-year-olds ask a billion questions that we can't seem to answer. And we're like, where are all those questions coming from? I can't bat them out of the park. But there's relation to being inquisitive and actually having great performance in work and in life. And you're going to share your research and some of what you came across. Before we go to sharing all that, share with the audience a little bit about your backstory and how you came to creating Hvisdos.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Christina. I am delighted to be with you today. And the story is not a very long one. It's one of these things where I have spent the last, let's call it 20 years in and around growth and commercial teams. And about 7 years ago, I had the good fortune of starting to work in a consulting practice, more or less, around commercial organizations. And the research at the time, some people and some of your listeners may remember research by an organization called CEB, which has subsequently been acquired by Gartner, but it was research called the Challenger Model. And what are these high performers doing differently as they're driving sales through organizations? And through that, what I was seeing and what my business partner and I were both seeing is that those teams that were able to embrace change, that were able to adapt to kind of the changing business world around them seemed to have something in common. And we determined that it really was curiosity and the willingness to stick their neck out, maybe ask some different questions and approach the world in a slightly different way. And where we went from there is we started to look at what is the research around curiosity. And to your point, as we open up, right, as children, we know naturally curious. The research will tell you that a 3-year-old will ask up to 300 questions a day. What happens though, right, and maybe you have this experience, once they hit about 11 or 12, that number from 300 drops to almost 0. And there's a couple of things at play, right? Like that's the big question, right? Like what happens? The teaching and what you see talks about environment being a big issue. So as you can think about in schools today, we push information to children. The other thing that happens, of course, is we've got this opportunity. Well, I have a 10 and 12-year-old myself right now who pretty much think they know it all. And if they don't think they already know it all, they'll just Google it. So there's a lot less questions. And when you translate that into the business world, what you find is you're just not able to innovate. So we started to look at, is there something that's a standalone around curiosity? Because you've got this wild debate. Is curiosity a characteristic? Is it a nurture versus nature? And our position is that we think there is a lot of nurture, and we're not doing a good job of that as we think about professionals today.
Wow. This is such a wonderful topic. It recalls for me because I'm also a consultant. I've gone into a number of businesses, and it's interesting. They come and they call consultants. I'm sure like they've called you and your business partner, and they'll say, hey, we have this problem. Can you help us resolve it? And so being an outsider, it's easy to see things that maybe you can't see when you're stuck in the mundaneness of every day. And you start bringing to the, front table, here's what I'm seeing. And they'll be like, well, that's great, but they don't want to change what they're doing. They want to keep doing the same things, but get different results. And it's almost like as adults, we become comfortable with, like you had mentioned in school, information pushed at us. Mm-hmm. And so we're used to just tell us what we have to do. We'll do that. But then if you give them something that's outside of their comfort zone or something they've done ordinarily, they just will go right back to the habit of doing things that they've already done and what's comfortable. And is it because they've just gotten used to not being curious and just having people kind of show them or tell them how to do things?
I think there's a couple of things there. I think one of them is the fact that the way that we have taken sort of the Six Sigma approach to business today, and we've taken something that was a manufacturing approach and tried to apply it to all parts of our business to drive efficiency. Fundamentally, of course, that also starts to lose some effectiveness. So then you do have people who say, just tell me what to do, because they're so risk averse. I think that is a big component of it. I think also, too, we just get saddled with our habits. What worked for us previously is the knowledge that we rely on moving forward. But the world, of course, is changing too rapidly around us to use that knowledge of what worked with us in the past. So we're fortunate in that organizations who are really starting to think about how do I solve this innovation puzzle, we kind of come at it from this perspective of if you fundamentally believe that creativity plus curiosity equals innovation, then we think we can help you. But what you have to do is you have to start nurturing curiosity in the organization. And that's really tough.
Yeah, I like that you just said that, because I've been in a lot of boardrooms with a lot of people, both top executives, the leadership, and then also the employees. And where they said, hey, we're a place that we really like to hear your opinion and we want you to bring it to the table. I find that it's often just words and they don't really mean it. They're like, great, it'll stay here in the boardroom. We like that you said something, but now we're going to do it my way. So how do you get the people running organizations or the leadership to understand that it's okay to let other people kind of join in with their creativity, and it's not going to stop from your leadership? In fact, leadership has nothing to do with letting other people have a part.
Yeah, you have to find some really, I almost think about them as like third level leaders in regards to embracing kind of ambiguity. And that's part of what we're asking organizations to do, because as we think about process and what we've done to eliminate ambiguity, it really has impacted our ability to keep getting creative. And to your points earlier, Christina, as you look at what we see across organizations, there's only about 40% of employees would agree that a company encourages curiosity. So to your point, right? Like, we have an open door policy. Great. The reality is, not so much. And we start to think about these barriers that we create in regards to asking questions. Part of those barriers are just the time and the space to explore options. And think about it this way too, right? In an organization today, if you think about their hiring levels, even though we've had tremendous economic recovery, most organizations today still have less employees than they did pre-downturn 2008. So a lot of people are taking on a lot of things and they don't have that space to do more. So you've got to have leaders who are really looking for what's that next edge and how are we going to tackle this in a way that we've never seen before.
Yeah. Wow. This is interesting to me because what I've seen a lot in businesses, whether it be small, medium, or large, is sometimes the leadership or the owners will decide, oh, okay, we are not getting enough done. We have less resources. Okay, we'll hire a bigger manager. We'll hire top leaders that will, you know, be in the $100,000 range or whatever. This director of blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, yeah, but they're not the ones doing the work. I think you need less people managing and being the leader and more people just, you know, working together. And it's sometimes I think the idea for some of these businesses is like the more money I throw at it and the bigger person, like leadership person, the more the problem will go away. And it doesn't always translate, I see.
I would agree with you. And so it's interesting as we start to go out and who our real customers are. We have to have that conversation up front in regards to what kind of investment and is this something that you can really support? And so as we think about that support, one of the things that oftentimes we'll look to do is how do we actually put people on a learning curve as part of an intentional approach to driving curiosity? And like that's an interesting position for a leader to be in regards to, I want you to take some of your best people who are able to deliver in this capacity, and I want you to stretch them or put them in a different place and risk what that other objective was. So you've got to have a good balance. But again, if you can start to think about what are we doing that's inhibiting curiosity and try to remove those things and start to nurture it and ask more questions, I think you'll find yourself in a position where you're actually driving more effectiveness. And right, like that's like what's so interesting. Even in I don't know if you caught this issue, the May-June issue of HBR, they talked about the surprising power of questions. And it's funny because I don't know that it's really a surprising power at all. To me, it's when we ask a better question, we get a better answer. And we've got to allow people that time and space to kind of think as part of that conversation.
Well, and it's interesting too, because when I've sat down with people who are the support staff or their employees, And I say, so what do you feel about things? And they just say, well, I don't feel heard. I feel like if I do speak out, it'll be used against me. So that's the other part of it. You get to the point where if I say this to my boss and I tell him, hey, I think there's a better way, they'll be like, oh, so you just want to do it this way because you don't want to do what I want, or you don't want to be a team leader, aka, follow my directives as the supreme leader of the universe in this place where you work. And so then they just say, well, why bother? Why bother asking the questions? Why bother being curious? And then you just get to a point where you are just getting through the day. I can't wait to get in to get out. And if you have employees like that, how efficient are they? And are they doing the best job for you, your company, and your customers? If they come in with that feeling like, I just can't stand this place. So it behooves everyone in the organization, including the leadership, to realize that your employees being curious is only going to be a good thing for you, and maybe bring things to the table you never even dreamed of that could explode your business.
Absolutely. And you touch on something very important, I think, which is sort of the state of employee engagement across the country today. And if you look at the research around that, it's pretty abysmal in regards to there are a lot of people who are getting in, getting out, and doing what's asked of them with, as seamlessly as possible in order to not add additional work, not have any other, I'll use the word retribution, if you will, or negative impact from a credibility standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've been doing is we actually are going into organizations and we're measuring curiosity at the individual level as well as the manager level.
Nice.
And then what we can do, and for lack of a better term, we use this opportunity to start to do interventions with those teams. So even though you may have an individual who's highly curious, you may have a manager who, to your point earlier,
mm-hmm.
is not necessarily nurturing that curiosity in a creative, productive way for the business.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's about how do we engage with that leader to make them more effective. So that's part of what we do within our practice, is go back in and work with those teams in order to drive curiosity. But again, not curiosity just for curiosity's sake. It's about performance. And that's what's the cool thing is, most of the research you see today talks about curiosity in regards to our personal well-being, reductions, if you will, in Alzheimer's, relationships and the strength of our relationships and having a greater sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're doing is how do we apply it specifically in the business environment and recognize its importance to business growth, innovation, and everything organizations are trying to achieve today.
Wow. Now, how does this work, though, when you go in, you start seeing, okay, there could be a more efficient way of adding creativity and curiosity. I'm guessing some of the leadership is a little uncomfortable with, for one, being challenged on, well, you're not really bringing out the best in your crew as far as curiosity and questions. How do you deal with someone who might be uncomfortable with the change of habits and change of being?
I think it really is about a touch and tone from the senior leaders that helps drive receptivity. So again, we're really fortunate to have a good support level from the top in the organizations we work with. But change is always hard. So if you are working with a team that recognizes the importance of curiosity, has had that communicated to them over time, and then also from a support level has the ability to show vulnerability within their organization, it works well. So there are occasions, I won't lie to you, there are occasions where you get resistance, right? Flat out resistance, maybe even sometimes rebellion.
Yeah.
But more generally, if you talk about it in regards to how it's going to help the team, how it's going to help you as a leader be more effective, and what it's going to mean for the business overall, people can start to get over that hump pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when they start seeing it work. As we said earlier, I think that's why you notice, and they've said about children, that you learn things so well. You can learn like 3 languages before you hit like 5. And I think it's that your brain is so receptive to information and to curiosity and learning that you just swallow it up like a sponge. And I think we could all be like that as adults. We don't have to be 5 years old. I know our brain's probably more plastic at that age, but I think it's still possible to get all of that information and learn more and have more knowledge even as an adult if we just get more curious.
Absolutely. And what we see, and this is where the fun comes in, because most of the measures around curiosity have always been attributed to like personal well-being, predictors in regards to intelligence. And we kind of pull apart, like a lot of people will talk about curiosity as an EQ. And for us, it's really about there's IQ, there's EQ, and then we talk about kind of a CQ. And what's fun is when you can actually show the direct link to performance. And we've been fortunate in working with organizations to be able to prove out that link. And that's where the buy-in comes, when you can start to talk about what does this mean from a performance standpoint, not just curiosity for curiosity's sake. Because a lot of people think about, well, this seems like it's going to be a big time suck, or we're going to maybe go in a wrong direction. And it's like, you've got to iterate quickly, but you need to explore different ideas. And of course, your best idea isn't going to come in 10 minutes. You've got to allow for that opportunity. So that's really where we're trying to get people to think, is how do you ask different questions? How do you approach something from a different perspective in order to open up new possibilities?
And also, I think what people are scared about is we do this new thing and it doesn't work. And I'm like, that's great. It didn't work. You know, this is not the right path. And we do cross correct and we do something different. I think as adults, we've gotten scared that we can't make a mistake. We can't do something quote unquote wrong when, okay, we now realize that doesn't work. So now we can use a different approach.
Yeah. And it's very few organizations, I think, recognize that risk of credibility. To your point, most people don't fear losing their job. They just fear losing their credibility inside of an organization if they fail. So if you have to be willing to have failures and learn from those as part of this process, and that's, again, something that you have to just talk to openly across the organization in order for people to get comfortable. And then, of course, you have to back up that talk with no repercussions, right? You celebrate some of those failures in regards to, hey, here are the things we learned along the way. So I think it's how we treat those failures that's going to make a big difference long term.
Absolutely. And I see here that Hvisdos also add for their analysis, they use NLP, which people might have heard about, and there might be some myths around it. How do you use NLP, and what is it to understanding curiosity and the correlations?
For sure. So if you look at the research around curiosity, there's a lot of self-reports around curiosity. The one that I always think of is Todd Kashdan's work. And as I look at that overall, if we think about curiosity from an assessment or a hiring tool, a self-report is something that could probably be gamed pretty easily. So as we were looking at how do we continue to define curiosity, is there actually a language around individuals who are more curious than others? So what we did in the research over the last several years is we have been looking at how do those individuals who report out on this self-report as highly curious talk differently than their counterparts. So we're using a natural language processor, data analytics, much of what people hear about all the time. We're partnered up with some folks out of Stanford and with Microsoft, and looking at, in an open-ended response manner, how do we see those individuals talking differently? And so we've been building algorithms to help us measure curiosity just using your language. And our hope ultimately is to get rid of the self-report long term.
Wow. Have you noticed any key words or phrases around people who are more curious?
One of the things that you'll pick up, Christina, is people are actually a little bit more open to possibilities. So we are still writing those algorithms and still defining what that looks like, but there definitely are some triggers that we're seeing specifically within that. So as we're continuing to work through those algorithms and get a lot of that IP, if you will, finalized, there are some very cool and unique things that we're seeing in regards to the openness to possibilities and the language that individuals use.
And I'm loving this from a perspective of your personal life, that this doesn't just have to be for businesses out there who can become more curious and gain more productivity and performance from their employees and their business. But in your life, I'm thinking being curious can be a wonderful thing to bring more performance and greater effectiveness in your life, where you can have a fuller life.
Absolutely. And there's actually a lot of studies that talk about like living longer, certainly as far as that greater feeling of purpose. I will tell people how I get started. If I think about how I embed curiosity in organizations, the very first thing I ask them to do is start practicing asking better questions. And that's whomever you're in dealing with, whether it's in a business situation or a personal situation. There's always room to practice that. I personally still practice asking better questions of the individuals that I meet. Certainly think about how you learn about individuals. Again, some of that research talks about the greater sense of bonding that people have if you're engaged in a conversation, you're asking questions versus telling. And think about it this too, like from a coaching perspective, right? Coaching versus managing. Coaching is all about asking better questions.
You're right.
So there's implications, I think, across your entire life, not just in the business world, but certainly things to be thinking about in regards to what are we doing to nurture that of others, and then also instill it with ourselves.
Oh, that is such great points. I was working with a coach a number of years ago, and it was interesting because I had gotten to a point where if I wasn't happy about certain things in my life, you'd be like, why is this happening? How did this happen? And so it's always those questions that can't be answered. And she's like, instead of asking how, why you, let's ask different questions. Where do you want to see your life? What would it look like if you did have the life you want? Let's draw that out. And if you say this is a failure, well, where did you learn from it? And, so in actuality, she was just asking better questions that got me out of the rut of the same kind of circular questions of why me, how me, whatever. And those wonderful questions that get you nowhere but a vicious circle.
Absolutely. And that's really, I think, where this started. And going back to sort of our earlier conversation and how we opened up, when we were looking at change and transformation, there's a lot of organizations that we're working with today who fundamentally are being disrupted. They have to have transformation. They've got to do something differently. And when we started to identify what's different between the organizations that are able to create this change and the organizations that aren't able to create this change, one of the things that we picked up on is just how they approach asking questions, getting curious and digging in, whether it's around their clients, their employees, all their customers, things along those lines. So that really is that adaptive, if you will, in what we were seeing and what organizations were able to succeed and what organizations just found themselves circling back on some of the same problems without any progress.
Yeah. And we do it in our personal lives as well. So it can become a vicious cycle until you stand back and say, okay, if I don't like where I am, let's ask a different question than I'm generally asking and go deeper. And it's possible for us all, both in our business and our personal lives, to get more curious and to be like that kid who's excited about everything. Because as you imagine, when you see a kid, they seem so happy and joyful. You notice? About life. I mean, everything's just like, oh, wow, the sky's blue. Why? And we can bring that joy back to our now lives. I don't want us to leave, Janet, though, without everyone finding out where they can go to Hvisdos and find out more about you guys and also call you up and have you come on into their business if need be.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Christina. I really appreciate it. Inquizo.com is where you can find information, including writings and our contact information. We would be delighted to partner with an organization. As I say, though, you have to foundationally fundamentally believe in curiosity plus creativity is how we're going to innovate. And if you don't buy into that, I'm not the right fit. But if you do believe in that, we certainly can talk to you about what this means for your organization and how we might be able to help.
Yes. And if you don't have an organization, you're just listening in, and hopefully we've gotten you curious and whet your appetite for more curiosity in your life. Just start asking different questions. Get out there and start hanging out with some kids to get you asked more questions, because when I hang out with kids, they ask questions I wouldn't even dream of asking sometimes, because there's no end to their questions and their curiosity. And we can all get a bit of that in our lives.
Absolutely, Christina. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for having me on today.
You betcha. Everyone go to Inquizo, and that's INQUIZO.com, and find out more today. And again, Janet, thank you so much for coming today and sharing your great gifts and wisdom on Savvy Business Radio.
Have a great one, Christina. Thank you.
Savvy Business Radio broadcasts worldwide via a large podcast network, celebrating business owners, entrepreneurs, influencers, and successful individuals. Find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest. Call 732-474-7375 or email Christina@savvybusinessradio.com.